Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Marvel and Sony released all the episodes for Nicolas Cage's Spider Noir with Spider-Man Noir. I know there are a bunch of questions about the ending, big Easter eggs, WTF moments. Does this have anything to do with his character during the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse movies, with Avengers Doomsday, because so many characters are crossing over in that, Avengers Secret Wars? We will break it all down. Based on what they said about the series, I wasn't expecting a ton of crossover with Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, but I was disappointed that at no point did he pick up a Rubik's Cube. I feel like that would have been enough. As you see from the episodes, they changed the plot of the original Spider-Man Noir comic book that they were adapting for this a lot, so it really just shares vibes of that original comic book run. What if Spider-Man in another universe got his powers in a completely different way during the 1930s Depression era? But in that universe, he faces all of his traditional Spider-Man villains just in 1930s form. Probably one of the biggest differences from the original comic book is that it features way more mainline, big A-list Spider-Man characters, and for the series, they wound up changing a lot of that to make it feel as different from regular Spider-Man as possible. Probably the best example of that is Nicolas Cage himself, who plays Spider-Man Noir during the series, but he also plays the character during the Spider-Verse movies. He's going to be in Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse as his Spider-Man Noir character, but for this series, they actually tried to explain that he's a completely different version of Spider-Man Noir, and during the Spider-Verse movies, he's Peter Parker from an alternate universe in the 1930s. During this series, they called him Ben Reilly. In the comics, Ben Reilly was just a clone of Peter Parker created by the Jackal, who had the same powers as Peter Parker. Silvermane was the main villain of this series. The Enforcers that they used from the comics also have a slightly different roster, I think because Sony and Marvel said you can't use really big A-list characters that we're going to be using in the movies or that we just used. But the series is the first live-action Spider-Man series that Sony or Marvel have tried since the 1970s. It's the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man live-action series, the Japanese Spider-Man series, and the Electric Company live-action Spider-Man segments, which were also in the 70s. So it has been since the 1970s since somebody, Marvel, has tried a live-action Spider-Man series. Mostly because at a certain point when Sony bought the rights from Marvel in the 90s, they decided they wanted to actually make more money off of him in the theatrical space. So we're just going to do Spider-Man movies. Nobody can do Spider-Man live action until now, where they do as different a version of Spider-Man as they could possibly do.
Someone once asked me what universe this was. All I could say for sure was it was the only one I knew of.
Lord and Miller made the series, they make the Spider-Verse movies. They were also working on a bunch of other Spider-Man spin-off live-action series that Sony was trying to produce. Now this is just Sony, not Marvel Studios, so Marvel is just working on the Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland's movies. It sounds like what happened is that a lot of those got canceled in development, particularly during the big strikes when Sony decided to reboot their Spider-Man spin-off universe after the Craven movie bombed, after successive bombs with a couple different movies. But it sounds like the Spider-Man Noir Nicolas Cage series was so far along in development, they just decided to let it continue. So we will see if they let this have a season 2. So keep in mind that the plot of the series was vastly different from the plot of the original Spider-Man Noir comic book series. So in the finale, they wrap up the Antidote storyline along with Spider-Man's fate continuing to be Spider-Man in the city, as well as Silvermane's storyline and what was happening with Cat Hardy, who's their version of Black Cat on the series. The main mysteries of Season 1 were why everybody got their powers, why all the Spider-Man and the villain characters got their powers. The Enforcers on this series, they're kind of like the show's version of the Sinister Six, but in the original Spider-Man Noir comic book series, they were more of a comp to the Enforcers, which were the big Spider-Man villain group before the Sinister Six formed. Maybe if the show can survive to successive seasons, they'll work up to a Sinister Six, because they did introduce the idea that a bunch of different POWs as part of their group also got similar biological powers the way that they got their powers. This was also one of the other big changes from the comic book. They explained that during World War I, Ben Reilly, as well as the Enforcers characters, the Sinister Six characters, were all POWs, or Ben Reilly's case rescued them. They were POWs, and the Germans were experimenting on them, and that's where their powers came from. German scientists were trying to create human-animal hybrids with a bunch of different Spider-Man-themed villains, basically all the traditional Spider-Man villains you would expect. The only ones we actually see show up during Season 1, the rest are all still alive out there somewhere, but the ones that we do see are Molten Man first, who is killed, then Tombstone, then Sandman, and then Megawatt, who's like the show's version of Electro, which I feel like they wouldn't let them use. Like, they wouldn't let them use Electro because Sony and Marvel just used him with Jamie Foxx's version of the character, and they probably want to bring him back at some point, which is why they don't want him using on the show. Like, no, we're going to be using this character again soon at some point. Also probably the reason why Silvermane was the main villain and not Green Goblin like the original Spider-Man Noir comic book. No, we plan on using Green Goblin at some point again during the new Marvel movies. They revealed that Ben Reilly got his spider bite from a man spider that the Germans had tried to create, so he basically got a diluted version of the serum that was transforming everybody into their animalistic forms, their Spider-Man powers. Because of that, Ben Reilly's transformation, his mutation, was more stable than the other Sinister Six Enforcer characters, so they used his DNA to synthesize an antidote, which they gave to a couple of the characters.
I'm going to have to harvest genetic material from your organ.
Ultimately, he winds up giving the last remaining vial to cure Sandman, who is the lover of Cat Hardy, Black Cat. So it's basically him sacrificing his happiness, saying that he will continue being Spider-Man, continue being a hero, bearing this cross, so to speak, being a hero for the city. We need to have a Season 2, so we still need to have a Spider-Man swinging around, so I will continue keeping my powers. One of the other biggest storylines was who had been trying to kill Silvermane this whole time. He was the big villain, so a number of people wanted him gone, but it actually wound up being Cat Hardy, who had been his kept woman this whole time that he'd been keeping in a metaphorical cage, so to speak, not letting her do anything she wanted. A couple of times she had fallen in love with different men, and Silvermane had either tried to kill them off or get in the middle of that relationship so that she could not ultimately be happy. So eventually she started to find different ways to try and get rid of him, kill him off. First, she hires Molten Man to try and burn down his mansion, killing him unsuccessfully. Then she tries to rat him out to the police so that they'll arrest him and throw him in prison forever. That also fails because of Ben Reilly inadvertently, who she then tries to use to get his powers to synthesize an antidote so she can cure her new lover, Sandman, and they can live together happily ever after. While this is all going on, eventually Silvermane learns about everybody with their powers and tries to assemble his own Sinister Six team, or Enforcers if you're making the comic book comp. And they also set up the idea that the more they use their powers, the crazier they go, the quicker they die, because they have unstable mutations. Each of the different Enforcer characters, Spider-Man villains, have slightly different levels of crazy, so Tombstone seems like he is the most sensible one. He's also the first person to get his powers taken away and goes back to being a good person. The way they play Sandman is that he's a good person too, but his powers start to drive him a little bit crazy, and he goes back and forth through the series, and you kind of wonder which way he's going to fall until he ultimately tries to save Cat and helps fight against Megawatt, who winds up being the worst of the bunch, like the craziest of the bunch. He eventually rebels against Silvermane so that Silvermane can't use the antidote against the Sinister Six characters, potentially controlling them, and tries to break out on his own and become the ultimate ruler of the city. We get a really solid three-way fight scene between Spider-Man, Megawatt, and Sandman. You can definitely tell they dumped a lot of the budget for the show into this big final fight. Cat Hardy uses the chaos to kill Silvermane eventually. In the way they play, they want you to think that he is permadead and he is not coming back. Like, they go to his funeral to see his body entombed, so it feels like he's supposed to be dead, even if the show does get a Season 2.
I'm happy it's you.
But after she does this, she winds up trying to stop Megawatt and gets in the middle of the fight. Megawatt tries to kill her, then Sandman rebels against Megawatt, and they try to take him down, Spider-Man ultimately throwing him into a subway car that's passing, making it seem like he got his brain splattered. But the way that Megawatt's powers work seem a lot like Electro's, and Electro can survive something like that, so they don't show you Megawatt's body, making it seem like he could potentially return in a Season 2 if the show does continue. So remember, comic book rules, they don't show you body, they're probably still alive out there somewhere in the way that they showed you Silvermane's body, so they want you to think that Silvermane is dead. Spider-Man winds up leaving the scene with his mask torn as if the crowd can see his face, and it felt like a comp to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2 when he's on the train and the crowd sees his face, but they still wind up trying to help him. Like, the city believes that Spider-Man Noir here is back, and he's a hero for the city again, and they really like him. When the series picks up, he'd spent the last 5 years after his lover, Ruby, that he was going to get married to, dies after a criminal tried to come after him. So it's Spider-Man No More for the last 5 years, which Tobey Maguire also did during Spider-Man 2 for a little while. And his arc during season 1 basically brings him back to being Spider-Man again full-time. Sandman winds up taking the last remaining antidote, and it seems like he and Cat Hardy will just live happily forever after as much as possible in New York City, and they will just eventually run into Spider-Man again day to day at some point. He goes back to his detective agency where Janet is now his partner. They changed the title to reflect that. They get their next case. Robbie Robertson also gets his own newspaper in Harlem, and he'll just continue being the news person to report on all the adventures that they have week to week. While this is going on, they leave things with the idea that several other members of that POW group got biological powers and they're out there around and can surface in a potential season 2. Other villains can come back. So this isn't the end of everybody that got powers. Lord & Miller, Amazon, Sony have not said whether or not they plan on doing a season 2, but they are in the middle of rebooting their Spider-Man spin-off universe with a live-action Miles Morales movie at some point after Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out. So most of their attention is on that stuff right now. I'm expecting that we probably will not see a season 2 for this show, and it'll just be a limited series. Also remember, they're treating this Spider-Man Noir, Nicolas Cage, as different from his Nicolas Cage Spider-Man Noir in the Spider-Verse movies. At the beginning of the series, he also says, one time somebody asked me, what universe is this? To sort of reference the Spider-Verse movies. At some point, somebody from the Spider-Verse visited his universe, asked him that question, then left to go back to the multiverse, went on their way. But at least the way he explains it in the first minute of the show is that he never knew about any other universes, just to tell you that he had not been part of the Spider-Force. So I'm not expecting them to reference this show during Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse next year. Not a lot of people also asking about Avengers Doomsday connections. Will he cross over into Avengers Doomsday? I'm also not expecting that either. He would likely show up as either Ghost Rider or some other character too if he does cameo.
Back to hell.
There are going to be so many cameos during Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. Anytime anybody mentions Nicolas Cage cameoing in one of those Avengers movies, usually they're talking about Ghost Rider, and I'm not even sure that he's going to show up as Ghost Rider during those. It might be some other actor playing a version of Ghost Rider, because we also know that Marvel has been working on bringing Ghost Rider to the MCU with another actor, not Nicolas Cage. When we do see Ghost Rider going forward in Marvel Phase 7, it will be a brand new actor. Generally, the series was solid, but it does feel kind of like a weird outlier in that we're not really clear who they made the series for, because it doesn't really feel like it was done for younger fans who are typical Spider-Man fans. They make the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland for younger audiences typically, and it doesn't feel like they did that for this series. But a lot of the older Spider-Man fans are mostly fans of Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, and they're not really connected to this, so it feels like if they were going for the older fans, then they would have tried to do something like this with one of those actors. So it is sort of weird that this did wind up existing, it's kind of a surprise, but it is fun, so I would recommend watching it if you're just watching this video and you have not watched the episodes yet. Definitely check it out, and let me know in the comments if you want me to do a longer breakdown and Easter eggs video for all the episodes, because there are 8 full episodes. There's a lot of stuff going on during the series. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below, and do let me know in the comments if you want me to do the longer breakdown video. We will see how this goes. Hopefully they will do a season 2 because it was pretty solid. I've already done a bunch of videos about the Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse trailer and the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailers. Click here and here for both of those. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.